Crack, you know what time it is, Stitt-Heads. We are back. I've got the original Big Beautiful Bill hanging out right behind me right now, if you can see. I mean, such a glorious man, wearing his dresses and whatnot. Anywho, we're going to have some fun on this episode. We get into this podcast world, we get into the social media world, we just meet random people, and then, like minds kind of start hitting it off, people sharing memes, and you're like, man, I like this person, I like that person. So I was introduced to this person a few months back, maybe a month or two ago, and it's the Female Doge, and she has pretty awesome story, and you're gonna love this accent. So welcome to the podcast, Female Doge. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, how you going, Derek? I settled in. I came to colonize America
Nice.
um, in December last year. I'm a dual citizenship of Australia. I was born in California, and yeah, I met another shit poster and fell in love and came and got came and moved to the States, and we live on a farm in the South. So it's good stuff.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, we were supposed to do this a few days ago, and it's funny you said your spouse is in the nursing field as well, and so is my wife, and so we know conflicting schedules and crazy long shifts of hours and everything, and that's part of what we're going to kind of get into a little bit is we could call it medical. I would call it chopping off shit and playing make believe, but there's a lot of weird shit going on in the world where it's like medical industry. What do you have to do? Whatever you're a nurse or a doctor and you come in there and the paperwork says it's a female and the big hairy balls are hanging out at the same time. You're like, hey sir, can you put your balls away real quick? It's like, it's I've actually asked my wife about that. It's kind of interesting that they're like, that hasn't happened to her, but yeah, they do have to do the preferred pronouns shit. And you're like, oh my god, world's gone nuts.
There was just a case in the UK where there was a group of nurses that got together, and there was a troon medical, like some kind of medical doctor that was coming in, like maybe a student doctor or something to that degree. But anyway, he insisted on being in the women's change room and changing right in front of everyone with all of that shit hanging out. And yeah, the women sued him. And I actually have a feeling that that case might have been one of the few that actually succeeded, because there haven't been many that have succeeded. Like the last success with this was the J.K. Rowling stuff in the
Mm-hmm.
UK, which has rolled back all of that woke shit that had really been secured in place by their Labor government there.
Absolutely. And it's kind of funny that like you get these little wins, even though they're still big wins, but in this grand scheme of everything that's going on, like everything, all these stories and movements keep changing and stuff. So Europe is already kind of fucked on a lot of things anyways, and has been for a while because of what they've been allowing. So even though they're getting these small wins with this trans community stuff, which seems like yesterday's news almost in a way, if you know where I'm going with this, now they've got all the immigration problem and the stabbings and the this and that. And like the most popular name in Europe for the last year is, guess what? Muhammad. It's like it's almost like once you break ground on a bit of a subject, the next catastrophe just comes on automatically.
What's the weird thing about all of that stuff in the UK is with like the people who are the woke transgender people supporting like the Islam issue in the UK, where it's like, dudes, if you were in the Middle East right now,
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't be supporting your rights. But I don't know. I think that what we're seeing is we're probably seeing like societal decay, and then certain what would you call it? Like certain ideas have been pushed by media for some time. When we were talking about this podcast, I said that it would be interesting to bring up the fact that there's obviously been some kind of what would you call it? Like there's been an a want to manipulate the masses via media.
It's like a subversion or whatever. I don't know if that's exactly the right word, but yeah, it's like an infiltration in a way. Like I'm with you. It's like I can't picture the exact right word, but it's like a manufactured movement. You know what I'm kind of saying? Like
Well,
they're
well,
they're
all
pushing an agenda on purpose. It's not natural.
No, they're not. And like with all of the really, really big names involved at the top of this, pyramid, because the thing is, once you dig below the surface, you realize like it's not even any kind of humanitarian issue. It's with corporate interest. So there's been some kind of corporate interest that is being pushed at the moment.
Mm-hmm. With
And that,
DEI and everything. Yeah, whichever box gets checked, that's an extra X amount of dollars for a company, you know?
well, there's also a correlation with the last names of the head people of all of these agendas as well. There's a certain amount of noticing that goes on, and then you see that correlation being possibly cultural. Is a certain group of people within society got a correlation to a more degenerate way of thinking and being?
Yes, absolutely. That's the thing that right before we hit record, I had kind of mentioned, this whole massive pendulum swing from one side to the other. It depends on who's in charge and this and that. And I was actually today is I'm technically a registered libertarian, but I haven't voted in the last two elections. I just gave up. I'm like, fuck it, whatever, it doesn't count anymore. But plus, I also wasn't going to vote for Chase Oliver. But anyways, that's another gay dude that kind of infiltrated making it fake and gay. But anywho, my point is, I was watching the Ron Paul barbecue 90th birthday bash, and it has Dave Smith and all these guys. And one of the guys, I can't remember who it was. I'd never seen him before, but he raised a great point about like Republicans, how like basically when your guy wins, you need to push back harder to make sure promises are kept. And then I'm not saying I'm a Republican, but like the Republicans are asleep on this whole Israel thing because Trump and what's Walters or whatever, they're all going, they're kissing the wall, and you're like, but everybody falls asleep on that one issue because it's icky. I don't want to talk about that. I'll get in trouble. And you're like, yeah, but not talking about it's what got us to this point. That's why the big noticing is going on. But then you got a shitload of Hitler bros now, and you're like, well, maybe that's a little too far. You know what I'm saying? It's really interesting right now.
I think the optics have really shifted in the last couple of years, and you see it especially with the Zoomer dudes. Wow, that generation of young men, you see them on TikTok and stuff, and I'm like, they're getting fairly radicalized. But you know what? If they were kind of little young, really young kids around the time this woke stuff happened, they're in the early 20s now. They've had a lot of the tail end of that anti male agenda being put into their heads. And so what are these young men going to do instead of having to be enforced to some bullshit leftism that hates them? That's what's going to happen. That's a
The
that's a
demasculating. Yeah.
absolutely like in the and that ties back in again back into the trans thing as well. Like if you demasculinize large segments of the population of men, and then start you've got endless immigration happening, then there's not going to be any men to defend the country, is there? Like it almost feels like it's a bit too perfect. If you destabilize a country, then that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
that leave them open to a whole bunch of things?
Absolutely. And kind of tying a few of those things we were talking about at the same time in there off of what you just said kind of made me think like, a little stoner rambling thoughts come in. But okay, if we keep propping up Israel, then you got the idea of a greater Israel project. We're demasculating our men over here in America, which, some we think like 1, 2 years ahead when you got other countries, say like China and shit, where they think like generations ahead. They're way, you know what I'm saying? They're setting the chess pieces way farther down the line. My whole point is what if we make Israel so strong enough to where we prop up their government and then eventually they attack us because we see a lot of this demasculation shit. And then even, the porn industry, the movie industry, banks, everything, all of it is unfortunately owned by Jewish people. And it doesn't mean every Jew is a bad person. There's like Owen Benjamin says, there's deli Jews, the guy that makes your Reuben. He's not controlling the world. He's fine. But, your Klaus Schwabs, your Epsteins, your, Weinsteins, Steens, and this and that, like, you kind of see what I'm saying? Like, what if it's some interior attack eventually to where, like you said, we won't even have an army. So we'll be just sleeping, sleeping like babies.
It's total subversion. Like I've actually heard some stuff like in amongst my rabbit holes that I get into on the internet saying that there's some pretty high powered Israel members that are actually shaking hands with some pretty high level Islamic clerics, so I would not be shocked if on some level there was a joined effort from them. Like they're the ones playing freaking 4D, 5D, 6D chess on us. Like, we're forgetting that those two apples don't fall entirely that far from the same tree. Like they've got a lot of the same beliefs in their religion. We don't know what the agenda is, but it seems like there is an agenda.
100%. It makes you, it's not too hard to think whenever we see the same shit going on with our own. I'm a WWE fan, WCW, whatever. I'm an old school wrestling fan since birth. And it's like once you realize that wrestling is fake, this rivalry that's been going on for 6 weeks, every time the cameras are off, those guys are out getting drunk, having fun together. And then the camera's back on, rivalry. And once we see that with our American politics of left and right, oh, we hate each other. And then meanwhile, oh yeah, it's a uniparty. That same idea with Israel and other Islamic states and things, like I could 100% see that, because that comes to the noticing of not just the Jewish stuff, but just noticing everything is a freaking lie and it's a facade. We live in the damn Wizard of Oz.
I just don't understand where, like, Israel is allowed their state, the Middle East is allowed, their places, but when it comes to like America or Australia and Europe, it's like, but we can't have that for ourselves. It's got to be open, open doors to whoever wants to come in. I just don't understand that. There seems to be this really insane amount of double standards, and then further, I don't know, there's a fair bit of gaslighting around the topic. And again, that ties into the overall topic as well. It's the whole thing. I think, how many years was society gaslit about like the trans agenda, that they had to play nice until people really started to push back? Like it took a long time.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
I
just let them get married. I mean, and then, nothing against just regular, normal ass functioning adult gay people, I guess. But at the same time, it's like the whole marriage thing. We look back now and we get why a lot of people were saying it's a slippery slope.
It is. I was about to say that it is a slippery slope. And then the whole thing that concerns me is like there is like steps after full acceptance of this trans thing. They've got further agendas. Like their agenda like is way more. That's like the thing when you meet like young people that are really, really caught up in that kind of echo chamber of the way that, their community acts. Deeply, deeply concerning.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't actually think it's going anywhere. I think that they've pushed a lot of it underground, and we all know that when things are pushed underground, they kind of perpetuate in different ways. So now, what I'm concerned about is like, I don't know, what's the next agenda? Is it that
Yeah.
we know exactly what it is though, and it was like publications like Redux. Redux is a pretty good one for this type of information. They talked about it for years. It was like ties into the whole like, why were they wanting, children to come to drag queen story hour? Like there's that element of like child grooming that like can't be overlooked. That's pretty intrinsic to their whole movement where, they don't have children themselves, a lot of them. So they have to recruit pretty much.
Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, there's a new noticing as well going on with that, on not just the recruiting, but like the adoption thing, where it's a really high rate of two gay males that are married adopting little boys. And then the numbers and statistics of said little boys. There was another news story that broke this morning. I didn't save it, but it was pretty fucked up. Like basically they raped, tortured, beat this like 13-month-old baby boy that they had adopted. And it's like these stories are uncomfortable, but the uncomfortableness doesn't mean that they don't need to be freaking talked about. That's the problem, is that slippery slope. We just, oh, let him be, acceptance,
Yeah.
let this be, let that be, let be. No, it's not exactly that way, man. Like, and it doesn't mean that every person that's homosexual that adopts a child is going to rape that kid, but it's kind of like, I don't know, pit bull attacks. People want to say, no, it's not pit bulls. There could be a chance that, yeah, it might be pit bulls. There's more statistics, the statistics don't freaking lie at the end of the day sometimes. So anyways, yeah, back to grooming. It's kind of fucked up.
It is. And I also I actually had a quick read of that website I mentioned, Redux, and
Hmm.
I found two really recent articles. It was pertaining to, because we've been kind of led to believe that for the most part America is kind of, trans people aren't very acceptable if it's a red state or whatever. New York and Illinois are both holding two really high level sex offenders in prison with women. One of them killed, who was black, a troon, decided he wanted to be a woman in Illinois, and he killed his mother. And so now they've put him in with the women. And this is right now, this is like within the last week. And then another account I heard of in New York was that a troon is being held in a women's prison on Rikers after crimes against kids. So this is still actively happening in the US. It's happening in Australia and England as well. It's the issue with locking up these really, really, really evil dudes with
Hmm.
women in prisons, and then it also happens in the shelters as well. And so women who are in a pretty shitty, vulnerable, fucked up situation, and then you've got these men who aren't just, they're freaks, and this
Yeah.
is fine, and no one's fucking talking about it. And so I'm going to stop talking about this shit when I stop seeing this shit happening within our society. We're Western society. Why are we allowing this? Why are we making this seem like it's okay? You know?
Hmm. It's
And
almost, it turns into a like a scapegoat as well to use for some people, like you kind of tiny bit alluded to on part of that, where I mean,
yeah,
I'm not saying particularly this case, but a lot of cases we've seen in the past decade, 15 years, where people get busted and they're like, actually, I'm a female. And you're like, dude, your
yeah.
voice is lower than Barry White. You know what I mean? Like, you are not a female, but you're using that for a lesser, punishment.
Well, the
It's
thing
not
that's
necessarily
really,
a lesser punishment, but I'm saying you get to go to the female's prison instead of get your ass whooped at the male's prison. But yeah, go ahead.
but this gets even worse though. So the women that are talking about ending this shit, right? The women that have kind of put their head out on the line and said, right, bringing this to the attention of society. We've got liberal women turning around and doxing them, fucking their lives up entirely because these liberal women are so brainwashed into this fucking ideology, and they can't even see that they are the ones going against women. They're not actually freaking all girl power and shit. Like, they're fucking lighting the fire from in the building, man.
Thank
Like,
you. Yes, continue.
yeah. And so I think that there's been this ongoing freaking culture wars for years and years and years. And it's like, if that's what kind of radicalized me, because I spent a lot of years in kind of these turfy spaces where they were having this really heavy discourse about this transgender shit before it kind of became mainstream, and you'd have just these full-on wars with these liberal feminists, and they're like, "You're a Nazi. This is white woman's feminism. Transgender women are real women," and they will go out of their way to dox you and ruin your life. And it's this culture war, and it's like, do these young women know anything at all? Like, do they not realize that they are virtue signaling for a group of people within society who are deeply depraved?
Yes. And then these people are given, like, this minority is given so much power and just so much of a voice that, okay, everybody should have a voice. I understand that. But before I forget this, you just hit on something I wanted to ask, because I haven't had a whole lot of female guests on here. So I'm glad I've got a female guest on here talking about this trans shit and whatever else, because it can show two different perspectives, not just two dudes talking shit on fool fucking faggots or whatever. No, I'm saying, as a female, I'm glad you're outraged and pissed off, because what happened to, I'm not saying be a feminist, but what would happen to woman's power and this and that, and, hear me roar and this and that. It's like it turned into, wait a minute, women want to be women. Now women want to be men. Now women are cool with men being women. Like, what happened to women? Like, you're erasing yourselves in this weird way.
Women's kind of liberation and safeguarding of like women and girls doesn't have to be this really disgusting kind of liberal thing. You can come from a real maternal perspective, and you can be like, no, I give a
Yes.
fuck. I give a fuck about kids, I give a fuck about girls, and I give a fuck about what happens to women in society, you know, at large. And if women are the ones who are suffering from this shit, and I'm glad they're talking out about it now, but I'm fucking enraged that it took so many years. Like, I know of like at least two or three court cases in Australia where the women were losing these court cases to these troons because based on the idea, on the premise that woman is a feeling and not something intrinsic to your DNA, you know. And then there's this whole, I get kind of sentimental about the subject where I'm just like, I feel like it's a desecration to like to womanhood, you know?
Absolutely. It's an embarrassment. I mean, it's like laughing, especially when they cheer it on themselves, regular biological females, when they cheer this on that trans women are really women, like you're like diminishing yourself, you know?
It's completely ruined my pool for socializing within like, you know, I'm a millennial. It's ruined my chances of making like-minded female friends, all of this culture war shit. Like with my age group, you know, kind of middle 30s ish,
That's
it's
yeah, that's
like
what I am. Yeah.
you go to try and meet, you know, like-minded, you know, women, however, and you start talking to them about this stuff and they're totally captured by it, you know?
Well, here's a funny thing too, is that even with like I've got three kids and a wife, and I don't know if you have any children or not, but I mean, just the like the amount that they've let it slip into schools. And my kids go to a smaller town school. Homeschooling is the next step. I'm seriously, I was mentioning Ron Paul. We're going to the Ron Paul homeschooling program within the next maybe 2 years or so. But point is my kids' school was always like very conservative values. You could say, you know, like they'll pray, they'll do things like not all the time, but I'm saying like they'll pray before a big football match or this or that or whatever. And all of a sudden, my daughter, who's going into sixth grade next week, last year and a half, her friends are talking about pansexual and asexual and this and that and cis and what. I'm like, you don't even the terms that kids are using, they shouldn't be using any term that says sexual. You don't even know what the fuck sex is at this point. But even to my point is like the smaller schools, it's getting infiltrated everywhere and it is like a virus. But I've got deeper thoughts. But I mean, I don't know, I think it really just all winds down to the damn, what do you call it, the you know, depopulation agenda. You know, the more we get people pissed off at each other and not procreating and then confused and not knowing what they are and chopping their shit off. And you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I do kind of feel like there is an element of like accelerationalism that goes along like hand in hand with all of this stuff because it also teaches like people and like kids this level of like self-hatred and takes away like those virtuous, wholesome things that like young people are meant to have, like pride for yourself and, you know, oh, I come from, you know, I look like my grandmother, and, you know, all of this nice base level kind of normalizing
Your
stuff.
grandmother's a racist. No, yeah, exactly.
Oh, we'll never understand, you know, how base that silent generation really was. Like most of them have passed now, but oh gosh, they were a funny generation. The other thing that I had on my list as well was um I was at some protests. There's a woman called Kelly J. Keane, and she has been at the forefront of the UK pro-woman movement.
Hmm.
She's a self-confessed mother and wife. She doesn't identify as a feminist. She might align with some of the rad fem stuff, but that's, you know, that is what it is. But anyway, she did a talk in 2023 in Melbourne, and I just moved down to Melbourne, and one of my friends at the time said, "Oh, you know, there's this Let Women Speak corner. Would you like to come along? You know, Kelly J. Keene's going to be there." And I'm like, "Oh, sweet. You know, she's over from the UK." We rocked up, and there was like about 3,000 troons, rabid, spraying feces on the women. There's literally about 50 like biological women at this. Like it was literally a speaker's corner. It wasn't meant to be some big protest. It was just women getting up and like saying like, you know, I am entitled to my space, blah, 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 that type of shit. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, it kicked off big time. They would have had about 10 police on horses. They had about like numerous cops on the ground as well. It was really kicking off. They were spraying shit on people. And then a tune came out from the audience. King hit one of the little chicks that was there, one of the biological women people, one of the supporters of that. And then they also had like the freaking Proud Boys rocked up, the freaking neo-Nazis rocked up, and it just
Damn.
ended up being this full on, like, I don't know, like feels like the internet got spewed onto the sidewalk with all the culture war shit.
Turned into a
Um,
Royal Rumble, yeah.
it was, but it was a big thing. But that tune that hit that young chick, she ended up getting a brain injury from it, and there was a
Ooh.
pretty big pro woman advocate in those circles in the UK that spoke about it on his podcast. But anyway, that was a really screwed up event because the Proud Boys ended up rocking up because the police weren't going to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had all of these rabid leftists doing what they do, frothing at the mouth. And the police weren't offering any security whatsoever, any help, they weren't even trying to stop the crowd from coming in.
Well,
So
because their hands are tied because of litigation and all kinds of bullshit of their government and whoever their officials are, police chief, like, oh, you can't put a baton across the troon and now you're giving us a lawsuit, you know?
but there is the kind of watershed moment that would end all of this ludicrousy shit in a day. And been saying this for a while. I think that if the people that have gone in for all of the operations and it was botched and they realize it was all fucked, the
Oh
detrans
yeah.
people, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I feel like those within that group of people within the population and more of these operations getting botched, that's probably what it's going to take to really push it right over the edge in a thing where it's like it's not even okay anymore. This is an abomination. This should never have been happening in the first place. This was an oversight.
That's what I kind of feel like happens with a lot of things with you're right. I mean, it's going to take more and more of these people that were tricked into it to come out and
Mm.
tell their horror stories because they have firsthand accounts. They have this, here's my scars, here's my this. Can't have kids now. I can't do. Meanwhile, it's like when the thing was currently going on and at the height of it all, oh, you're a transphobe, you're a bigot, fuck you. Throw all your words at me. I don't care. Yes, I'm all of them. You ran out of words. Now what? Cool. I'm still smiling. My point is though, is like it's like that with wars. We don't realize till 20 years later, oh shit, man, maybe this was a fucked up situation. We just went with the flow. And that kind of goes with culture because it's like culture is manufactured. So with all this trans shit and everything, it's just this big wave that comes in. And then you see the after effects of what happens after the tsunami or whatever hits the mainland. And then you have to repair after that. And everybody recognize, like, you kind of see what I'm saying? Like, it's weird how it just shifts like that, but people are waking up. But it sucks it's taken this long.
Well, I think it was a gradual thing though. I think with that, because do you know about the origins of queer ideology? Do you know who created that whole ideology? Do you know that whole thing?
Does this go back to the what we talked about off recording
No, no,
book burnings
no.
or earlier than
This
that?
is no, this is another thing. This is like during the 60s or 70s when queer ideology was created by a man called John Money, who did some really, really screwed up things to a couple of young intersex twin boys, and he was a complete degenerate pervert, and he's the person that coined the phrase and put it into the lexicon of language. That's where it came from.
Hmm.
That's the origins of it. So it's this strange word that obscures the meaning of things, queer. What are you saying? What are you saying? What does that mean? Queer ideology, it makes things very gray. And I think when things are made gray, that leaves things open to like predatory movements and the similar.
100%. You think about like it's almost like a defense mechanism. Like it's almost like that. Did he get busted doing the things he did before coming up with that term? Like using it as like a scapegoat. Like, well, actually, it's queer identity instead of, well,
Well,
no,
it
you know
was
what I mean?
tied with all of the Kinsey Institute stuff, which I think the Kinsey Institute was started. I think Kinsey was a Jew, so it was this whole
Mm-hmm.
like sexology wave of things where they were like mixing ideas of like sexuality and sex with psychology and
Yes.
Sigmund Freud, and all just very strange things, you know, like obscuring the meanings of things.
Yes, reality is getting blurred at this point because yes, okay, Freud and all of the psychological of it all, and then also, you know, our MK Ultra programs here in America after World War II and everything, like it really turned into like, what can we do to manipulate people to just go along to get along in this weird way? Like trans movement, yes, trans women are real women. It's like they're robot NPCs. Like they're and then that goes to the Rockefeller education system as well. Like it's all just fucking with your mind. Like trying to disassociate you from reality and thinking this is okay because my TV told me so, or you know what I mean? Like it's a weird thing that it's a mental psychosis of the masses, basically.
It totally is. And they don't even realize, like, if you say a word enough times over and over and over, the words does start to, the meaning starts to kind of dissipate a little bit. So if the more they're repeating it out loud, you know, needing to affirm themselves, the clearer it is. Because if you're an actual woman, you've never had to affirm yourself for a moment in your life. There's never been a
Right.
doubt. You've never turned around and gone, okay, I'm a real woman today. I'm feeling like a real woman. Like,
Did you see the video of Neil deGrasse Tyson, the great piece of shit, condescending douchebag? I think space is fake and gay anyway. We don't have to go into that conversation. But Neil deGrasse Tyson, everybody's favorite black Jesus, condescending douchebag, and he of all people, it's funny because we knew he was full of shit, but a lot of people, oh no, he's just black science man. You can't. It's like Obama. You can't say nothing bad because that means you're racist. And you're like, no, dude, he's a fucking idiot. Well, anyways, about a year, maybe 2 years ago tops, he got asked in an interview what his thoughts are on um, basically like transgenderism and like sexuality being on a spectrum. And he's like, you know, we all wake up some days and you feel a little more manly, and then maybe later in the afternoon or the evening you feel a little more effeminate, or vice versa. And it's like it's a spectrum. You're like, so they're even trying to infiltrate like the modern science or talking heads to tell you that like it's okay. Like, no, dude, man up or chick up or whatever, you know, take your feminine responsibilities, take your masculine responsibilities. Don't do this weird fucking confusion crap on our brains that like, hey, at 2 p.m. you can be a man, but at 7 p.m. it's female time, okay? Like it's
I
retarded.
hate, it's always that kind of changing of goalposts that you know the woke community will use. They'll be like, well, you know, that girl was pretty, you know, pretty masculine in the way she dressed. You know, we better go and cut her tits off. She's a man now, and it's like it was never. They don't understand that that's not even what it is. You know, I could get around wearing the grungiest, most male clothes on the planet, and that still would not like affect the biological truth of it all. And you know, I've made a post on Facebook today. It was just like, you know, there are tomboy girls and there are little boys that like to play dress ups, and that's just what kids do. And you let kids be kids, and they'll, you know, they'll grow up healthy if you just let them be and don't try and interfere with them with all of these ideologies that are around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, it's funny that, like you're saying, even in like a tomboy sense, there's this new controversy. It's all over the internet. We all have seen it. We're memers and shit. But with the Sydney Sweeney and the jeans, it's like, oh wait, so even a girl that's wearing blue jeans, like she's like a tomboy, that's still even a fucking problem with the retarded feminists on the left because oh jeans. I'm like, my show is called Talking Stitt. It's called a pun. It's a play on fucking words. Jeans, a jean company, a pretty blonde haired girl with blue eyes. Like, okay, it's not some whistleblower, I mean, not whistleblower, some dog whistle to neo Nazis or some horse shit like that. You're like, hey, look, people like chicks in jeans, like Claudia Schiffer and shit back in the day, and they like big boob blondes, like, you know, Pamela Anderson. You're like, America's kind of healing in a little bit of a way, but you're like, they're still even outraged by that. You're like, what the fuck?
See, that's the thing I was talking about earlier about the inventing of the outrage. You know, I think that because we've been, you know, it's been such a long time between world wars, and I think that, that thing we were talking about, like the societal decline, the fall of
Hmm.
empire, the fall of empires. I feel like idle minds, aren't a great thing for society at large. And I think that in previous times when people were in a life or death situation or fighting wars or, on their conquest, they didn't really have time to have imagined problems.
Well, that's where we are with, okay, before we say record, we were talking about like Rome and even like, we were talking about Greece, but what happens with a lot of these societies is like you said, like idle hands are the devil's plaything. I don't know how religious or biblical you are, and it's fine if you are or aren't. But the thing is with too much time on your hands, if you have a farm, if you have animals and chickens and this and that, and you have to hunt and you have to go out and find food for your family and you have to provide and you have things to actually fucking do that really matter, then you don't have time to sit there and worry about, I wonder if I feel like a girl today. It's like you don't have time to think about these stupid bullshit things. And then that's where most empires fall because they get too distracted. They look at the dumb shit and focus on that, hyper focus on that. And then an invasion comes from a further country or another country that, further advanced their army while you were sleeping like retards.
Yeah, I think that it's happened that many times. It's like, the society will reach a certain pinnacle and then it'll kind of plateau for a while. And then this degeneration starts to happen. And in the case of Rome, I always heard the story that when Rome was falling, the men were cross dressing. So it kind of feels like as society becomes more and more destabilized, I feel like the trend is to go to this excess way of living, excess sex, excess trans, excess this, just do as much kind of fucked up shit as you can do because, that's a living embodiment of the decay of society, isn't it? That's a society that isn't cohesive anymore.
And then they had the little boys that were, whatever, hey, whatever they, whatever terminology they use. But yeah, the little boys that were hanging out with them and we can all imagine if hey sex is sex no matter what age, no matter what. That's that decline, and we're kind of looking at it right now of like you got the minor attracted persons weirdos that are trying to normalize that, and you're like back to
That's
that
very
slippery slope.
That's very Weimar, that's super Weimar, that type of stuff. Like it is, it's a direct reflection. Like we kind of touched on it before, but yeah, the books that they were burning was a whole lot of books about like homosexual books, books about like transgenderism, things to that degree. That's what they were burning, because they were as a result of the Weimar Republic, they were seeing an utter degeneration of German society. The population wasn't focused, and it was kind of in reveling in all of this kind of sin, I would guess. And so I think that when the Austrian painter stepped in and wanted to push out, the Rothschild Bank and push out Weimar, I think that he very much was trying to focus on bringing things back to some kind of a base level of really like originally of family values that have been lost during the Weimar.
Mm-hmm.
You
it
kind of got to you can't like look at it in a way where you've got to look at it with some nuance. And I think we're understanding now that the way that things happened in World War II, it was a reaction to how things were in society.
yes, and that goes to just history in a whole of with World War II. Which group was just say by what our standards of history are told were the ones that were persecuted, and the 6 million this and the numbers don't add up. Calculators, they have errors when you get into that. But the thing is like you said, it's a reaction to things that were going on. So that pendulum swing, man, it's like things get so bad to where it turns into an over extremism in some ways. But even with what we are told on the history of what it is, who wrote the history books? Who this? History is told by the victor, his story. So that's what people don't really like break down like words and etymology. You don't even have to break down to the origins of words. It's sometimes just literally right there in it, his story. So you get like Ghislaine Maxwell's father with what the fuck was it called? It was not um it was like the financier shit with McGraw-Hill textbooks is loosely wrong, slightly right, but it's something with a P that I can't remember. But my point is you have all these people that the victim gets to write the story, or we don't really know what happened in World War II, but it seems like we're ramping up for very similar situations, whether it's our government, Israel's government, a lot of things. I know I'm rambling, I do that, but it's, I don't know, it just repeats itself. Here we are again, you know?
We're reaching a really weird, I've noticed this really weird trend online where people will be uniting with Islamics online based on the fact that Islamics aren't a big fan of Jewish people. And that I just think that that's just seems like a really strange way to look at things. Because where I'm kind of sitting when I'm looking at the UK, slightly off topic, but we know who are causing the issues there at the moment, and we know that Keir Starmer is one of the chosen people. So it's all pretty fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I wanted to go back into another thing that we kind of tapped on to before. It was the pathologizing of the insecurity and allowing a paraphilia to root on all levels of society, like we mentioned in the school system. So do you think that the only way moving forward in education is going to be homeschooling if they don't completely overhaul? Because I think it's happened right across the West with the school curriculum aligning with like DEI type of stuff. Do you think that that will continue?
Um, I think it's a domino effect or a snowball that's just kind of started, and it's kind of too fucking late. I think it's going already, and it's only going to get worse. Even if it slows down a little bit, it's just going to keep rolling. And it's like our rights or citizens, like, they don't ever give anything back. They just take another thing. So it only gets incrementally worse. So my thought is I think that a lot of people are going to give up on the actual school system itself, the
Yeah.
public education system, which, if that's the case, looking at it where it is, people are like, oh, if everybody homeschools their kids and their kids are going to be retards. Your kids are cutting their dicks off and half retarded already going to the public education system. What do you have to fucking lose at this point? You know what I'm saying? Teach
Yeah,
your
yeah.
kids to trust their gut, learn to work with their hands a little bit. Absolutely learn book stuff, but I'm saying, like, meaning like you could teach them other things and other values instead of feeling like they're in a prison cell every day. Because if you line up photos of how a prison and a school is, the school buses, the prison buses, the lunch line, the this line, the food line, it's the same fucking thing. And so if you can take that away and you let kids excel without that higher hand coming down from, like, well, authority says you have to learn this curriculum. I think, I don't know. I mean, it might take a decade or longer to make a better education system publicly, but I think the one that we have currently is fucked and it's done.
I'm a pretty big fan of like the Steiner and the Montessori education models. I think that they're really, really nice models for, I don't know, having kids learn in a more kind of well-rounded, more natural environment. I also think with young little boys that the whole system's overlooking how active little boys are. I think that if you were going to school little boys in a more effective way, you'd have them burning off a bit more energy during the day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also had this thought as well. Okay, when we were in our in our early 20s, can you remember there being as much division and tribalism in politics? Because I can't remember it ever being this divided when we were in our like maybe late teens, early 20s. It seemed like the left didn't seem as like it was wild like it is today, and the right kind of seemed like a little bit in a way something that our parents did in a way. I think there was a different angle on it when we were young.
Absolutely. There was that, you're more liberal when you're younger, and then as you get older, you turn more conservative. And whether you have kids or not, or you just paychecks and you see your taxes go and shit. But you're 100% right on that. I think the real catalyst of that was back to, like, my WWE references. Donald Trump. Donald Trump was a literal freaking. He was in wrestling for a stint in the early 2000s with him and Vince McMahon, the Battle of the Billionaires. And if WWE is fake, and now this guy is coming into politics, and then you start to they turned politics into WWE. The 2015. I mean, like Obama was kind of making things a little like people were kind of noticing some weird shit, but like back to that, like, oh, he's Black Jesus. You can't say nothing about Obama. You're like, okay, we'll let it slide, but we're kind of noticing. And then when the Trump shit happened with Trump and Hillary, shit hit the fan. Everybody that never paid attention to politics was now paying attention to politics. Kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I just I think that it's become more aggressively tribal. Like I don't think the divide between kind of the little political groups has become ever been as big as it is now. And I also think it's interesting how it all kind of we think of like the left and the right or the alt-right as being like one whole thing, but it's interesting when you actually look at it. It's all these very separate, lots of ideologies under
Mm-hmm.
one umbrella, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
it's not just, oh, you're on this side, you disagree with this. Yeah, everything's nuanced.
yeah, yeah. But I think the issue I always had with like the so-called hard left is they'd be sitting there, being moderately bigoted and, dipping their toes into like more, I don't know, more edgy discourse. And then, as soon as they'd be in a group chat with a transgender person, their attitude would change. Yes, comrade, no comrade. And I'm just like,
Yeah,
you guys are fucking retarded, I swear.
exactly. They get like away with some safe, dangerous, like we're gonna push back on these things. And then it's like, hey, well, this guy wants to be called a girl. And you're like, okay, you go, queen. You're like, hypocrite, shut up. If you want to be loud about something, be loud about everything. Don't That goes back to like what I said about the Republicans and like, oh, we're all strong against the get the queers and all this, blah, 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 and get the Mexicans out of here and this. And then all of a sudden, like, Trump and all the Republicans go kiss that wall, right? Well, we got the excuses kick in. You're like, dude, shut up. Like, just be yourself. That's what I wish everybody would realize is like the left or the right doesn't give a shit about you. All they're trying to do is make you not give a shit about the rest of each other.
It's very true. And I honestly think that until we start to see some independent parties in the West getting into like major positions, then we're not going to see a move away from this trend. Like, I think that it's pretty obvious that right across the West, this two-party system isn't doing anyone favors at all. And there's way too many corporate interests involved.
Mm-hmm. And then what is, corporate interest, companies, governments combining? I don't know. What's that term? It's fascism,
I think
They-
that I think that this government has done some good things, but then the amount of negative things that have happened recently with the Israel stuff has pushed back a lot of the premature positivity some people might have had. Because I was pretty positive as soon as I got here. They did all those anti-transgender laws. I was stoked.
right. It
I'm
it does turn into that lesser of two evils. I absolutely am glad Trump won over Kamala, but at the same time, you're like, man, y'all are just proving to us that it kind of really doesn't matter who wins. We all get, we all lose.
And I think it's probably always going to be that way for the foreseeable. I like to think that, the UK is going to erupt in civil war and they're going to overthrow the tyranny and shit. In my dreams, there's a revolution.
I love
It
V for
probably,
Vendetta. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. But I think that the best thing to do, like, wrapping up with all of this stuff, is I think that we've still got it. We can't let this stuff be removed from the consciousness just because a bunch of laws in the last X amount of months have, put some things in place. I think parents still have to be super aware of the kind of places online that their kids are spending. And I think that, you've got to be conscious of it still. Like I said before, I'm not going to stop talking about it until, all of this shit stops happening entirely.
This is how we change it. And everybody wants change immediately. That's not, I don't know. I mean, change can happen in a spontaneous moment of some shot heard around the world, freaking Revolutionary War stuff. We don't necessarily want it to happen that way. We just want, like, it might take a generation, it might take two generations. So you raise your kids correctly now, And then it might not be their generation, but they raised their kids correctly with the values that you taught them. And it's like hard work, learning how to use, use tools, use your hands, use your brain, read as many books as possible, quit staring at tablets as often. It's like if we instill some of these values to people, and then, just the traditional wife idea of it too is like we've detracted women from wanting to have kids, and that's just a whole nother psyop on its own, because then eventually their womanly instincts do kick in after they've done all their crazy shit over the decades. And then, I mean, no offense to them, but they'll be like 50 and going, I want to have kids now. Too fucking late. You've been lied to. So we teach our kids the right way. Look, God made us, whatever your God may be, uh, make babies, live your life, and then you're going to die. And that's what it is. But hopefully the values you instilled on the babies you made continue on in the fucking world and make it a better place instead of a worse place like it looks like now.
It's such a common conversation in like nationalist group chats on Telegram and stuff. The constant theme through all the chats is like, right, marry, have children, marry, have children. And it's like, the left thinks it's all this edgy shit. It's literally people in chats sending pictures of cats telling them to settle down and have kids. Like that's what it is.
It's always, I mean, like, oh, humans are like animals. What do animals do? They're born, they fuck, they have kids, they shit, they eat, and they die. That's what humans do as well. And I'm not diminishing humans to animals, but I'm also saying, like, we are just creatures as well. Like, that is the point of it. Nobody cares about your social ideology horse shit of, I feel like a fucking horse today or whatever. No, man, like, go. Like, if you're that, maybe those people don't need to have kids. But I'm just saying, like, but yeah, that's the point of it. It's like we are in a weird way like animals. So, chicks are attracted to strong, tough, big muscle dudes because those guys were providers. It's in back to the genes. Oh,
Yeah.
it's in the genes and the providing. Like that big provider came home with an ox on his shoulder that he killed by hand and fed the family for the next 2 weeks versus the tiny soy boy that cried about his feelings in his journal and his family starved to death.
I think trying to bring up kids in in a way that is as wholesome as possible. And, I think the way to raise healthy kids and not have them getting caught up in these ideologies, lots of outdoor time, lots of nature time, lots of acting time, all of those things, sports even, horse riding, whatever you like.
Mm-hmm. Well, it creates structure. Yes.
It does. It does.
And then
But
it also rewards you when you do well. I mean, like you start to recognize like, oh, well, your kid playing football and now he's the not second string quarterback, he's first string quarterback, like
yeah, awesome. Well, dude, it will be awesome to come back another time and maybe we'll get at someone else and go like a three-way discussion on some other strange and edgy or whatever type of topic. Super fun.
I'm always down. Yeah. And that's the thing I always do on this show. Everybody's welcome back again. I talk too much anyway, so usually everybody leaves with something they still want to say. So that's what part two is usually for. But I have loved this. It's nice getting a female perspective on subjects that a lot of men talk about. And that's not that females don't talk about it, but the thing is the females that do talk about it, they get shadow banned. They don't get shown as much because it turns into, oh, you see all these bigoted males or these transphobe males. They hyper focus on the dudes that speak out about it, but there's just as many women that are like, this is horseshit. So, Female
Absolutely.
Doge, this has been awesome. Actually, having like I said, two kind of back and forth ideas of man versus woman, man and woman. Like, it's nice to be able to actually have a conversation that way. Tell everybody where they can
Uh,
find you.
it was awesome. Everyone can find me posting memes on the Female Doge on Facebook.
Right on. Well, I love it.
All
I'll
right.
probably drop this episode on Monday. So Monday morning, I'll tag you in it and we'll go from there. But you're always welcome back. I've loved this conversation. So Stitt-Heads out there listening, don't forget, we're out here putting the ass in classy, and I will see you next time, bitches. Peace out.